I quite like David Christofulli. I remember I've done television panels for him in the past, and he struck me as someone who really does mean well. And perhaps I agree with you, it might be hard to kind of sell him in the north because he comes across as a very urban guy, like very, very city. But perhaps do you think that quality about him that is genuinely well-meaning, could that win over more people in the regions?
Well, time will only tell, but you've got to remember, I first met David Christofulli when he was Deputy Mayor of Townsville Council, and he was Deputy Mayor alongside a Labor a mayor at that time, Jenny Hill's still up there. The CFMEU got offside with David Christofulli and quite literally forced him out of Townsville, and that's why he finds himself on the Gold Coast. He was probably a little too progressive at that stage for that council. He's down there now. I think over the time he spent on the Gold Coast, he really has lost touch with what has happened in the north and the central parts of this state. I live in central Queensland, so I'm acutely aware of the difficulties that we face and certainly the lack of funding that we face in this part of the region. There's also a big push, Daisy, if you look closely, there's an undercurrent growing from Gladstone to North Queensland and far North Queensland, where they're hoping to split off as a separate state altogether because of the fact that our regions have largely been neglected over far too many decades. But as I say to those people, well, if we split the state from Gladstone north, what happens to the people in regions like St George and Roma and all those regional western parts of Queensland in the south of our state? What happens to them? Because they will become the future forgotten, like they already are now, of what would be a new state. So splitting the state's not the right option. There has to be a better balance. There has to be better representation of the regions. I don't think Christofulli actually understands that, and Labor certainly have no idea on how that feels.
So you wouldn't be a fan of a kind of quote-unquote Quagsit movement then in Queensland to split the state?
No.
Sorry,
I don't think we're at that point yet, yeah.
I had to say Quagsit, I'm sorry. It came to my head and I thought, no, perfect name for the movement. But you do make an excellent point, though. It's all very well, isn't it, to talk about splitting the state. And I've heard that argument, and to a degree, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, there's a huge cultural difference between, say, the north of Queensland and central Queensland and southeast Queensland. But again, it's that forgotten pocket of the regions, isn't it, down south that will get absolutely left behind. What do you think Christofulli's best bet is for catering to the regions then?
Well, there's a number of things that certainly we'll be targeting as a party, as One Nation, and it's up to David Christofulli as to whether he wants to listen or not. I see David needing to, first and foremost, start talking to those minor parties, One Nation, the Cousens party as well, because they do have the ear. We certainly listen to the regions better than the two major parties. Keeping in mind too, David Christofulli's got a great challenge. The majority of his members are located in the southeast corner of this state. Now, unlike federal, where the federal part of Queensland, they've got seats basically from the Sunshine Coast all the way to the tip of this state. On a state level, they don't have a great deal north of Gympie. Labor hold those. So Labor have got an advantage there. They've got seats in Cairns, they've got seats in Townsville, Rockhampton, Keppel, where I am here, and they're going to be tough seats for him to win. Now, he's got to win at least 14 over the next 12 months to be able to form government in his own right, which is almost impossible. But with that said, if he plays his cards right and he's willing to form a style of coalition, a minor government supported by crossbenchers like the Cousens and certainly with One Nation, we will never, as One Nation, give our preferences to the Labor Party. But however, we will certainly make arrangements to give our preferences, recommend our preferences, because let's not forget that the voters own their preferences themselves. But if David Christofulli wants to form government, I think the key is to ensure that he has a strong Conservative crossbench that are willing to help him form government in this state.